What would you do if your own blood stabbed you in the back? This isn't just a story, it's a warning. And if you've ever trusted the wrong person, you need to hear this. Before we dive in, hit subscribe right now, because stories like this will make you question everything you thought you knew about family. My name is Richard Hale, and for most of my life I believed I had built something solid, something that would outlast me. A family, a home, a legacy. I was born and raised in Ashburn, a small town tucked between rolling hills and stubborn oaks. Life there wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. My father worked with his hands, my mother with her heart, and I followed their path, laboring hard, saving every penny, and teaching my own children that loyalty and love are the only currencies that matter in this world, or so I thought. For 68 years, I lived by those values. My wife, Margaret, passed away too soon, far too soon. Cancer doesn't ask permission before it rips someone away. From that day on, I poured every ounce of myself into raising our daughter, Claire. She was my light in the darkness. I would have laid down my life for her, and in some ways, I nearly did. You see, I wasn't a wealthy man, not in the flashy sense. I didn't own fancy cars or a sprawling mansion. But what I had, I earned with blistered palms and sleepless nights. A modest house on the edge of Ashburn, a pension I built through for decades at the steel mill, and a savings account not much, but enough to make sure Claire never struggled the way Margaret and I once did. Every scraped knee, every school project, every late-night fever, Claire had me there. When she was accepted into Riverton University, I was the loudest father in the auditorium. And when she called me years later, voice trembling with joy, saying, "Dad, I met someone. His name is Daniel, and he's the one," I wanted nothing more than to see her happy. I welcomed Daniel into our lives with open arms. He was charming, successful, a banker from the city with a smile that could melt glass. I shook his hand the first time we met and thought, this man will take care of her. I can rest easy knowing she's safe. But life has a cruel sense of humor. The first crack in the glass came years later, so subtle I almost missed it. It was Christmas Eve in Ashburn, the kind of night where the snow covers the roads like a thick quilt, muffling every sound. I had baked cookies badly but with love. I'd wrapped gifts in the clumsy way only fathers can, tape sticking to my fingers and ribbons knotted like shoelaces. I called Claire. "Sweetheart, what time should I come by tomorrow? I can bring the ham." "You know how your mother used to." There was a pause. Not long. Barely a breath, but long enough for me to feel it. Daniel and I were thinking of keeping it just us this year. You know, with the kids and all, it's easier. Her voice was calm, practiced, but to me it felt like the floor gave way beneath my feet. "Easier," I whispered. "Claire, it's Christmas. We've never." "I know, Dad," she cut in quickly. "It's just, we weren't expecting you, not expecting me." Those words sank into me like rust, sharp, silent, irreversible. That night I sat alone in the living room. The tree blinked weakly, ornaments glinting in the half-light. Margaret's old rocking chair stood across from me, empty, as if even her ghost had been uninvited. I told myself it was nothing. Families change, children grow up, traditions shift, but deep down I knew this was the beginning of something darker, something I couldn't yet name. The weeks that followed proved me right. Phone calls went unanswered. Visits were shortened. I'd show up with gifts for the grandchildren, only to find excuses waiting at the door. "They're napping, Dad. They're busy with school. Maybe another time." And always that same phrase echoing in my head. "We weren't expecting you." I wanted to believe it was just Claire being busy, overwhelmed with work and motherhood, but Daniel's smile grew colder every time I saw him. He had a way of looking at me like I was an inconvenience, a relic taking up space in their perfect lives. Still, I swallowed my pride. For Claire, for the children, because fathers do that, don't they? We bend, we sacrifice, we keep showing up, even when we're unwanted. But the day came when bending turned to breaking. It was late spring when I received a letter in the mail. Strange, because most bills and notices came electronically now. The envelope was thin, official looking. I tore it open without much thought, and then I froze. Inside was a mortgage statement for the house. My house. The one Margaret and I had paid off decades ago. Only it wasn't in my name anymore. It was in Claire's and Daniel's. My hands shook as I flipped through the pages. Signatures, dates, transfers I didn't remember signing. Somehow, without my knowledge, without my consent, the very roof over my head had been placed under their control. My stomach turned to ice. This wasn't neglect. This wasn't being too busy. This was betrayal. The daughter I raised, the girl I held through every storm, had taken the one thing left that tied me to Margaret, the house where we built our lives. And she hadn't just taken it, she'd buried it beneath lies, hidden it behind smiles, and let Daniel pull the strings. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, the mortgage papers spread out before me, and felt something inside me shift, something heavy, something dangerous. I wasn't just a forgotten father anymore. I was prey. And if they thought I was going to lie down and let them devour me, they didn't know me at all. For 68 years I had been Richard Hale, the man who endured, who gave, who forgave. But now I was something else entirely. Now I was a man with nothing left to lose. Sleep didn't come easy after I found those mortgage papers. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Margaret's face. Not warm and smiling, but fading, vanishing, as if the very memories of her were being stripped from me along with the house. By dawn, I was sitting in the kitchen, the mortgage statement spread across the table like a crime scene. Coffee sat cold in my cup, untouched. My thoughts ran circles until they landed on the one question I couldn't ignore. How had my name disappeared from something I'd paid off decades ago? How had the house, my sanctuary, been signed over to Claire and Daniel without my knowledge? I needed answers. The bank in Riverton wasn't far, but the ride there felt like a march toward execution. My hands tightened on the steering wheel, knuckles pale, as though letting go would send me spiraling into the abyss I already felt beneath me. Inside, the air smelled of polished wood and expensive perfume. Everything gleamed, the floors, the counters, even the fake smiles of the tellers. I approached one, a young woman with a name tag that read Lydia. "Morning," I said, voice rough. "I need to ask about a mortgage tied to my property on Willow Lane." Her fingers danced across the keyboard. A moment later her smile faltered. "Yes, Mr. Hale, that mortgage is currently active under Claire Hale and Daniel Rowe." "I know that," I snapped, harsher than I intended. My throat tightened. "What I want to know is how my name got erased from it. That house was mine, paid for in full." I never. Her eyes darted nervously to the side. "I can't discuss personal account details unless you relisted as the account holder." "I was the account holder," I growled. She hesitated, then leaned in just slightly, voice softening. "Sir, what I can say is, these things usually require consent. Signatures." Her words hung in the air like smoke. Signatures. My stomach churned. My hands, stiff with age but steady with rage, balled into fists. If signatures were required, then someone had forged mine. Someone had stolen my identity. I left the bank in a daze, papers clutched so tight in my fist they tore at the edges. Outside, the spring sun mocked me with its warmth. I thought of Claire, my little girl, who once clung to my hand at county fairs, who cried into my shoulder after breakups, who whispered "I love you, Daddy" in the dark after Margaret's funeral. Had she known? Was she part of this? Or was it Daniel, weaving lies, charming her with that slick smile of his until she believed I had gifted the house? I wanted to believe in her innocence. I needed to, but the doubt had already sunk its claws into me. That evening, I pulled out the old lockbox Margaret and I kept in the attic. Inside were decades of documents, the original deed, insurance policies, even yellowing receipts from contractors who'd repaired the roof back in '89. I compared signatures, mine always steady, careful, the product of years working on forms and timesheets at the mill, and then the ones on the new mortgage transfer. Similar, yes, but not mine. The loops were too wide, the slant too sharp. It was a forgery, clear as day. That realization sent a strange calm through me, the kind of calm that comes not from peace, but from clarity. For weeks I'd been drowning in confusion, betrayed and bewildered. Now I had something solid, proof, but proof alone wouldn't save me. The next Sunday I drove to Claire's house in Riverton. I didn't call ahead. I wanted the element of surprise, though I wasn't sure what I'd even say. My heart pounded against my ribs as I walked up the cobblestone path, past the carefully pruned hedges and Daniel's shiny black sedan in the driveway. Claire opened the door. For a moment her face lit up, then quickly dimmed. "Dad, what are you doing here?" Her voice was cautious, like someone caught doing something wrong. "I need to talk," I said firmly. Inside, she hesitated, then stepped aside. The house smelled of lemon polish and expensive candles. Family photos lined the hallway, Claire with Daniel, the kids' vacations I'd never been invited on. I was a ghost in my own daughter's home. Daniel appeared from the living room, casual in a sweater, holding a glass of wine like it was an extension of his hand. His smile was razor-thin. "Richard, what do we owe the pleasure?" I ignored him and turned to Claire. "Sweetheart, why is my house no longer in my name?" Her face drained of color. She glanced at Daniel. He spoke before she could. "Richard, let's be practical. You're not getting any younger. Managing property, bills, it's a burden. Claire and I thought it best to take some of that off your shoulders." "Off my shoulders," I barked. "By stealing it out from under me." Daniel's smile didn't waver. "We didn't steal. You signed the transfer. All above board." My blood ran cold. "That's a lie." Claire shifted uneasily, eyes flicking between us. "Dad, maybe you don't remember." "Don't you dare," I snapped, the words cutting sharper than I intended. "Don't you dare tell me I forgot signing away my own home." I compared the papers. "The signature isn't mine. It's forged." The room froze. Daniel's eyes hardened, the mask of charm slipping just enough for me to see the steel beneath. "Be careful with your accusations," he said quietly. "Forgery is a serious crime." "Yes," I shot back. "Yes, it is." For a long, tense moment, no one spoke. Claire twisted her wedding ring, refusing to meet my gaze. Daniel's jaw tightened. I turned for the door. "This isn't over," I muttered. "Not by a long shot." Driving home that night, my chest ached not just from anger, but from heartbreak. Seeing Claire avoid my eyes hurt worse than any of Daniel's smug words. But the pain gave me purpose. They thought I was weak, old, easy to manipulate. They were wrong. I had spent a lifetime surviving storms bigger than this. And now, I was ready to weather one more. Because if Daniel wanted a war over the one thing I had left of Margaret, then by God I'd give him one. The days that followed my confrontation with Claire and Daniel felt like walking through fog. Heavy, suffocating, but also strangely clarifying. For the first time in weeks, I had a direction. I wasn't just drowning in betrayal anymore. I was swimming toward something, toward justice. But a man dosing tea take on a snake like Daniel Rowe with only anger in his pocket. I needed evidence, alleys, and maybe a bit of cunning. Something I hadn't flexed in years. My first stop was the law office of Emma Carver, an old friend of Margaret's who had attended our church for decades. She wasn't just a lawyer. She was sharp, relentless, and had a reputation in Riverton for defending people who had been steamrolled by bigger forces. Her office smelled of coffee and old leather. She looked up from her desk, glasses perched on her nose, and her face softened as soon as she saw me. "Richard Hale, I haven't seen you in far too long. What brings you here?" I dropped a folder of documents onto her desk. "A fight," I said simply. She skimmed through the forged mortgage, the transfer forms, my old deed, and finally the samples of my signature I'd brought along. Her eyebrows rose. "Good God," she muttered. "This is blatant. Who handled the transfer?" "Daniel Rowe, my son-in-law." She leaned back, sighing. "Richard, this is forgery. It's fraud. If we can prove it, the law's on your side. But Daniel must have pulled strings. No bank processes this kind of transfer without help." I swallowed hard. "So what do I do?" She gave me a small, grim smile. "We build a case, quietly. You don't show your hand until it's time." I left her office with a strange mixture of hope and fear burning in my chest. Hope because someone believed me. Fear because Daniel wasn't just a petty thief. He was organized. And people like him didn't go down without a fight. That night, I started digging into Daniel's world. It wasn't hard. A few calls to old friends around town, a couple of quiet chats at the diner where gossip flowed faster than coffee, and soon, a picture began to form. Daniel wasn't the golden boy he pretended to be. Behind the polished smile and expensive car, there were cracks, gambling debts, shady business ventures, a consulting firm that seemed to funnel more money out than in. The man was a house of cards, balanced delicately on lies, and he de-used my house, Margaret S.'s house, as one of his foundation stones. The next Sunday, I went to church, something I hadn't done in weeks. People there had noticed my absence. A few kind souls asked how I'd been holding up since the holidays, and I gave them the polite, practiced answer, "Oh, just keeping busy." But during coffee hour I pulled aside Tom Bennett, an old mill buddy who'd retired around the same time I did. Tom had a nephew working at Riverton Bank. "Tom," I said quietly, "I need a favor and I need you to keep this between us." His weathered face grew serious. "Anything, Rich. What's going on?" I told him enough to make the situation clear. His eyes widened, then narrowed with anger. "That snake Daniel," he muttered. "Never liked him. My nephew can probably get a look at those transfer records. Might be some notes about who signed, who approved." A spark of gratitude flickered in my chest. "I'd owe you one." "You don't owe me a damn thing," Tom said firmly. "You've carried enough on your back for that family. Time someone carried something for you." That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the house, running my hand along the walls, the furniture, the photos of Margaret. This wasn't just wood and brick. It was our history. The laughter of Christmas mornings, the quiet evenings on the porch swing, the tears shed after long days. I whispered into the still air, "I won't let him take this from us, Margaret. I promise you." A week later, Tom called. "Rich, my nephew found something. You'd better sit down." He explained that the bank had processed the transfer with notarized signatures, but the notary listed was someone local, a man named Calvin Price, a name I recognized immediately. Calvin wasn't just any notary, he was Daniel's poker buddy. My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth might crack. It was all falling into place. The forgery wasn't sloppy paperwork, it was a conspiracy. Daniel, with his charm and connections, had roped in Calvin to rubber-stamp the documents. The bank, trusting the notary, processed it without question. Emma Carver confirmed what I already suspected. If we can prove Calvin falsified the notarization, both he and Daniel are liable. This could not only void the mortgage but open criminal charges. Criminal charges. The words rolled around in my head like sweet honey. Still, I knew better than to confront them again. Not yet. Daniel was cunning. If he suspected I was onto him, he'd cover his tracks, bury evidence, twist Claire even further against me. So I played my role. The quiet old man, the defeated father, the ghost at family dinners. When Claire invited me over for Sunday supper, I accepted, smiling through clenched teeth as Daniel poured wine and bragged about his latest business venture. But behind my polite nods, I was watching, listening, collecting. I noticed the phone calls he took in hushed tones on the porch, the way he snapped at Claire when she asked too many questions about money. The unopened bills stacked on the counter, shoved under a pile of magazines. Daniel was crumbling whether he knew it or not. One evening as I left their house, Claire followed me to the driveway. Her voice was low, shaky. "Dad, is it true?" "About the forgery?" My breath caught. "Claire," she shook her head quickly, glancing back at the house. "Don't tell me. I don't know what to believe anymore." Her eyes shimmered with tears. "I love Daniel, but sometimes I wonder if he's really the man I thought he was." I wanted to grab her hands, to beg her to see the truth, but I held back. If she wasn't ready, pushing her would only drive her deeper into Daniel's shadow. Instead, I placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Sweetheart, the truth has a way of coming out, no matter how deep someone tries to bury it." She nodded faintly, then hurried back inside. That night, I sat in my car under the stars, heart pounding with equal parts sorrow and determination. The truth was coming. I could feel it, and when it did, it wouldn't just free me. It would tear Daniel's entire empire of lies to the ground. Emma Carver was relentless once she had something to sink her teeth into. Within days of confirming Calvin Price's role in the forged documents, she was drafting letters, filing quiet motions, and assembling a case strong enough to topple Daniel's scheme. "Richard," she told me one late afternoon as I sat across from her oak desk, "we don't strike until the timing is perfect. The goal isn't just to get your house back. It's to dismantle Daniel's credibility so thoroughly that he'll never be able to pull something like this again." I nodded, though my insides churned. "Timing," I echoed. "How long?" "As long as it takes," she said. "Patience is your greatest weapon now." Patience. I'd lived a lifetime of it, but waiting while my life was in the clutches of a man like Daniel tested me in ways I hadn't thought possible. Meanwhile, Daniel's facade was beginning to crack in public. I noticed it first at church when his usual confident smile seemed tighter, his handshake weaker. People whispered about a business deal gone sour, an investor pulling out, a sudden shortage of cash flow. Rumors spread quickly in Riverton. Daniel had always thrived on being the man with answers, the man who knew people. But now his confidence looked brittle, like glass under pressure. One evening while sitting in my truck outside the grocery store, I overheard two younger men talking near the carts, rose and deep. One muttered, "He owes the Whitaker brothers a stack he can't cover. That's why he's been pulling favors left and right." The Whitaker brothers weren't people you wanted to owe money to. They ran gambling rings on the edge of town, and their collection methods were brutal. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, my chest tight. Part of me pitied Daniel, but a bigger part, the part that remembered Margaret's soft hands, her laugh in this house, knew this was his own doing. Emma advised caution. "Let him unravel," she told me. "The more desperate he becomes, the more mistakes he'll make, and mistakes are leverage." So I waited, and I watched. Then came the night Claire showed up at my door, pale and trembling. "Dad," she whispered as soon as I opened it. "I don't know what to do." I ushered her inside, sat her down at the kitchen table. She twisted her wedding ring nervously, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. "It's the bills," she confessed. "They're piling up. Credit cards maxed. Daniel keeps saying it's temporary, that money's coming, but, Dad, I've found letters, debt collectors, threats. I don't know what's happening anymore." Her voice broke, and my heart cracked with it. "Claire," I said softly, "you don't deserve this burden. None of it is your fault." She looked at me then, eyes wide with something between fear and hope. "But what if he drags me down with him? What if she cut herself off?" Shaking her head. "I don't even know who I married anymore." I longed to tell her everything, to lay out Daniel's fraud, his forgery, the case Emma was building, but Emma's warning echoed in my ears. Patience. So I swallowed the truth and instead took my daughter's hand. "Sweetheart, you're stronger than you think. And when the truth does come out, you'll see you were never alone." She nodded faintly, clinging to my words like a lifeline. A few days later, Tom Bennett called again. His nephew at the bank had found something new. Irregularities in Daniel's accounts, suspicious transfers, large sums moving in and out within days, like someone trying to wash money through clean channels. Emma's eyes lit up when I told her this is gold. If we can link these transactions to Calvin Price or any of Daniel's known debts, it's not just fraud, it's money laundering. Judges don't take kindly to that. The pieces were falling into place faster now. Daniel was cornered and scrambling. It was around this time that Daniel confronted me in an unplanned collision that nearly tipped everything too soon. I was leaving the hardware store, a bag of nails in hand, when his black SUV rolled up beside me. The tinted windows slid down, and there he was, jaw tight, eyes like burning coal. "Enjoying yourself, old man?" he sneered. I said nothing, just kept walking, but he pulled forward, blocking my path. "You think I don't see what you're doing?" His voice was low, venomous, poking around, whispering in Claire's ear, "Getting your lawyer friend involved. You're trying to poison her against me." Finally, I turned and looked him square in the eye. "Daniel," I said evenly, "I don't need to poison anything. The truth has a way of speaking for itself." For a split second I saw fear flash across his face, just a flicker. Then it was gone, replaced with a cold, rehearsed smirk. "You don't know who you're messing with," he spat, before speeding off. But I did know. I was messing with a man already halfway to drowning. Emma wasn't thrilled when I told her about the encounter. "Richard, you need to be careful," she warned. "Cornered men are dangerous. Keep your distance until we're ready to move. The last thing we need is him filing some counterclaim that muddies the waters." I nodded, but inside, a quiet fire burned brighter. Daniel's fear was showing. That meant our plan was working. As the weeks passed, Claire grew more withdrawn. I could see her wrestling with the truth she didn't yet fully know. She still defended Daniel in public, still played the part of the loyal wife, but her eyes told a different story. Doubt had taken root, and it was spreading. And me, I felt like a soldier on the eve of battle, gathering weapons, allies, and patience. Every new discovery from Tom, every legal angle Emma sharpened, every whispered rumor in town, it was all ammunition. Soon, very soon, the time for patience would end. And when that day came, Daniel Rowe would learn what it felt like to lose everything he thought he owned. The unraveling began slowly, almost imperceptibly, like hairline fractures in glass. At first, Daniel still strutted through town with his polished shoes and crisp suits, but the smile he wore was no longer effortless. It was strained, pulled tight, as if stitched onto his face. By now, whispers in Riverton weren't whispers anymore. There were conversations, open and frequent. People who once nodded respectfully at him now crossed the street to avoid his gaze. His clients, contractors, investors, local business owners, were quietly pulling away. I saw it happen at Miller's one morning. Daniel walked in, all charm and swagger, trying to order his usual, but instead of handshakes and backslaps, he was met with silence. A table of regulars suddenly found their coffee fascinating. Another man, a local contractor, mumbled an excuse and hurried out the door. Daniel stood there for a heartbeat, realizing the room was against him. For a man like him, that must have felt like suffocating. Later that week, Tom Bennett rang me again, urgency in his tone. "Richard, I think you should see this yourself," he said. We met behind his workshop, where he handed me a folder stuffed with printed statements, bank records, he explained. "Daniel's accounts are hemorrhaging money. He's been funneling payments to the Whitaker brothers through Calvin Price's shell company." I flipped through the pages, my pulse quickening. The transactions weren't just suspicious, they were damning. "Emma's going to love this," I muttered. Tom gave me a hard look. "Be careful, Richard. A man drowning in debt doesn't go quietly. Especially not a man like Daniel." Emma's office smelled faintly of coffee and leather-bound books when I dropped the folder on her desk. She skimmed the statements, her eyebrows arching higher with every page. "This is it," she said, almost breathless. "This ties everything together: fraud, forgery, laundering. Once we present this, a judge won't just rule in your favor. They'll dismantle everything he's built." A heavy weight lifted off my chest at her words, but Emma raised a hand. "Not yet," she cautioned. "We need to wait for the perfect moment. If we move too early, he'll wriggle out, claim clerical errors, or worse, destroy evidence. We need him exposed completely before we strike." I nodded, but patience had never felt heavier. The cracks at home were widening too. Claire came by one evening, her face pale, her hands trembling around a cup of tea. "He's changed, Dad," she whispered. "Daniel stays out late, makes calls in the garage, and when I ask, he snaps. Last night I heard him shouting at someone on the phone, begging for more time." Her eyes glistened with tears. "He said if he didn't get the money soon, they'd come for him." I clenched my fists under the table. The Whitaker brothers it had to be. "Claire," I said gently, "you need to protect yourself. If things get worse, you and Ethan need a safe place to stay. This house is always open to you." She swallowed hard, torn between loyalty to her husband and fear for her child. "I don't know who he is anymore, Dad. It's like the man I married has vanished." Meanwhile, Daniel was growing reckless. One night I spotted his SUV parked outside the tavern at the edge of town. I stayed hidden in the shadows and watched as he stumbled out an hour later, his tie askew, his face twisted in anger. He grabbed a man by the collar, Calvin Price, and hissed something in his ear. Calvin shoved him off, muttered something, and stormed away. Even from a distance I could see it. Daniel's empire wasn't just crumbling, it was collapsing under the weight of desperation. Then came the breaking point. It was a Friday afternoon when Riverton buzzed with the news. Daniel Rowe's construction company had defaulted on a major project. Half-built homes sat abandoned, workers unpaid, and furious families were demanding refunds. The local paper plastered it across the front page the next morning. "Prominent businessman faces fraud allegations." The photograph was brutal. Daniel caught mid-stride, his face twisted in irritation as reporters swarmed him. Claire brought the paper to my house that morning, her hands shaking as she set it down in front of me. "Dad," she whispered, "tell me this isn't true." I met her eyes and finally let the truth spill. "It's worse than what you've read. He forged documents, drained my accounts, and tied himself to men who will destroy him if the law doesn't get there first." Claire's breath hitched, her face pale. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because Emma needed time to build the case. And because I didn't want to break your heart before I had to." She covered her mouth with her hands, tears spilling over. "Oh God, what has he done?" That evening Daniel showed up at my door. No swagger this time, no rehearsed smirk. Just a man, unshaven, his clothes wrinkled, his eyes wild with exhaustion. "You," he hissed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You're behind this. You've been feeding people lies, turning Claire against me, ruining everything I've built. I didn't move. I just stood in the doorway, steady. No, Daniel, you ruined yourself. All I did was stand still and let the truth catch up to you. He lunged forward, his fist tightening, but before he could act, Claire appeared behind me. Daniel, she said sharply, her voice breaking. Stop. He froze at the sight of her, his anger crumbling into something raw fear, maybe even shame. Claire, please, he begged, his voice cracking. You have to believe me. They're lying. Everyone's lying. But she didn't step toward him. She stepped closer to me, and in that moment, Daniel knew. The fortress he thought he'd built was gone. Emma called me the next day. It's time, she said simply. We file Monday morning. With this much evidence, the court will tear him apart. I looked out the window at the old oak tree Margaret used to love, my heart pounding with a mix of grief and grim satisfaction. After months of waiting, of gathering strength, of enduring humiliation, the moment had finally come. Daniel Rowe was about to face the reckoning he'd earned. The courthouse in Riverton was old, built of heavy stone with tall windows that let in streaks of pale morning light. On the day of Daniel's hearing, the air inside buzzed with tension. Locals filled the benches, eager to witness the downfall of a man who once strutted through town as if he owned it. I sat quietly at the back, Emma beside me, her leather briefcase perched on her lap. Claire was there too, holding Ethan close, her face pale but resolute. She hadn't spoken to Daniel since the night he came to my door, but she had agreed to be present, to see for herself. Daniel entered last. He looked smaller somehow, his once sharp suit wrinkled, his hair slicked back too hastily. The confident grin was gone. Instead, his eyes darted nervously around the room until they landed on Claire. For a moment, his facade cracked, and he almost looked like a boy caught doing something shameful. The judge entered, the gavel struck, and the case began. Emma stood first, her voice clear and steady. Your Honor, the matter before this court is not one of small clerical errors or unfortunate business mishaps. It is a deliberate scheme of fraud, forgery, and theft orchestrated by Daniel Rowe. Over the course of 2 years, he siphoned funds from his father-in-law's estate, forged signatures to access accounts, and laundered the proceeds through shell companies tied to known criminal associates. She paused, letting the words hang in the room. This was not a mistake, it was a betrayal. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Daniel's lawyer, a sharp-suited man who looked more polished than his client, rose in defense. These are accusations without merit. Mr. Rowe is a respected businessman. He has employed dozens in Riverton, contributed to our economy, and built a home for his family. The so-called evidence is circumstantial at best and, at worst, fabricated by individuals who have long held a grudge. His gaze flicked toward me. I felt a surge of heat rise in my chest, but Emma placed a calming hand on my arm. Wait, she whispered. We're not finished yet. The prosecution laid out its case methodically. Tom Bennett testified first, describing how Daniel had pressured him into notarizing questionable documents. His voice cracked as he admitted, I should have refused. But Daniel, he has a way of making you feel like saying no isn't an option. Next came Calvin Price. To everyone's surprise, he had agreed to cooperate in exchange for a lighter sentence of his own. His testimony was damning. Daniel paid me to move the money. It wasn't just once, it was dozens of times. He said it was creative accounting. I knew it was laundering, but the pay was too good. He even bragged about how easy it was to trick his father-in-law, said the old man would never catch on. Gasps erupted in the courtroom. I closed my eyes, steadying myself. Hearing it out loud in front of everyone twisted the knife deeper, but it also vindicated me. When it was Emma's turn to present the financial records, she handled it with precision. She walked the judge through bank statements, forged documents and transfer receipts, connecting each piece like a puzzle. Here, she said, tapping a page, is the signature supposedly belonging to Richard Hale. Notice the slight curve on the R. Compare it to the authentic signature we pulled from his mortgage documents. They don't match. The judge leaned forward, nodding. Emma flipped another page. The courtroom sat in stunned silence as Emma laid bare Daniel's crimes, one document after another. Finally, it was Daniel's turn to testify. He rose slowly, straightening his wrinkled suit jacket, and tried to summon the old confidence. Your Honor, he began, I am not a criminal. I am a businessman. Yes, mistakes were made. I trusted the wrong people. Calvin Price, the Whitaker brothers, they used me. They made me look like the mastermind when I was just trying to protect my family. He turned toward Claire, his voice softening. Everything I did for us. Claire, for you, for Ethan. Your father was never going to share his money willingly, and we needed a future. I was building it for us. Claire's face hardened. She clutched Ethan closer and shook her head. No, Daniel, she said quietly, but everyone heard it. You weren't building for us. You were building for yourself. The words landed like a gavel strike. Daniel faltered, his shoulders sagging. The judge adjourned for a short recess, and as people shuffled out, Emma leaned toward me. This is going better than I dared hope. With Calvin's testimony in the documents, the verdict is inevitable. I nodded, though part of me felt heavy. Justice was within reach, but it came at the cost of my daughter's heart. When court resumed, the judge's decision was swift. Based on the overwhelming evidence presented, I find Daniel Rowe guilty of fraud, forgery, and embezzlement. Restitution to Mr. Hale will be calculated, and further sentencing will be carried out in the next session. Until then, Mr. Rowe is remanded into custody. The room erupted into murmurs again, but my eyes stayed fixed on Daniel. 2 officers flanked him, snapping handcuffs around his wrists. For the first time, the mask was gone. His face was raw, terrified, broken. As they led him away, he looked over his shoulder at Claire. "Please," he whispered hoarsely, "don't let Ethan forget me." Claire didn't answer. She just turned her face away, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. Outside the courthouse, the air was crisp, and for the first time in months, I could breathe fully. Emma placed a hand on my shoulder. "It's done," she said softly. Claire came to stand beside me. Her son nestled in her arms. She didn't speak, but she leaned into me, drawing strength from my presence. And in that moment, I knew Daniel's downfall wasn't just about justice. It was about reclaiming my family from the wreckage he'd left behind. But deep down, I also knew one thing. This wasn't the end. Men like Daniel didn't fade quietly, and something told me the shadows he'd entangled himself with weren't finished yet. 4 weeks after the trial, Riverton buzzed with whispers about Daniel Rowe's downfall. His name was splashed across the local paper, his photo plastered on news broadcasts. The once polished entrepreneur now reduced to a convicted fraudster awaiting sentencing. Strangers stopped me on the street, some to congratulate me, others to gawk. "You must feel vindicated," they'd say. But vindication didn't feel like triumph. It felt like standing on the ruins of a burned house. Yes, the fire was out, but nothing familiar remained. Claire moved back into her childhood home with Ethan, her belongings packed into a few battered suitcases. She barely spoke the first few days. At night, I'd hear her crying softly behind her bedroom door, her son's small voice asking, "Why is Mommy sad?" I wanted to protect her from everything, the betrayal, the shame, the weight of rebuilding. But some things I couldn't shield her from. And then came the reminder that Daniel's story wasn't truly finished. It started with a phone call. I was in the kitchen, rinsing dishes, when the landline rang. The number was blocked. "Mr. Hale," a low voice rasped when I answered. "Congratulations on sending Daniel down. Brave move." My grip on the receiver tightened. "Who is this?" The caller chuckled. "Friends of friends. Let's just say Daniel owed people. People who don't like being left unpaid. And when someone like him goes to prison, debts don't just vanish. Someone else picks up the tab." The line went dead. For a long time, I stood there, staring at the wall, the sound of the dial tone humming in my ear. 2 nights later, a brick shattered my front window. I rushed to the porch to find nothing but broken glass and a note tied around the brick. "Stay out of things that don't concern you." Claire found me sweeping shards off the floor. Her face drained of color when she saw the note. "Dad, is this because of Daniel?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, his friends, the Whitakers. Maybe others think I interfered with their business." She clutched Ethan to her side. "So what happens now? Are we in danger?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to promise her safety. But the truth weighed too heavy. "I don't know," I admitted. Emma returned when I called her, her expression grim as she studied the note. "This was always a risk," she said. "Daniel was tied to criminals who don't forgive easily, but they thrive on fear. Richard, they want to scare you into silence. If you show them you're not afraid, they'll lose their leverage." I almost laughed. "Easy to say, when you don't have a daughter and grandson under your roof." Emma softened. "You're right, but there are steps we can take. Protective measures. I'll reach out to law enforcement, get patrol cars to pass by the house. And if the Whitakers try anything more direct, they'll find themselves facing charges of their own." It helped, but only slightly. Fear doesn't vanish because someone tells you you're safe. Fear lurks in the corners of every darkened hallway, in every shadow cast by the streetlight. One evening, Claire sat at the kitchen table, Ethan asleep upstairs, her hands wrapped around a mug of untouched tea. "Dad," she said quietly, "I keep thinking." I knew. Maybe not everything, but I knew Daniel wasn't what he pretended to be. I saw the late nights, the lies, the excuses, and I looked away because it was easier. Because I wanted the life he promised. Her eyes shimmered with tears. "I let him take from you. I let him hurt you, and now even Ethan isn't safe because of the choices I made." I reached across the table, covering her trembling hands with mine. "Claire, stop. This isn't your fault. Loving someone doesn't make you guilty of their crimes. Daniel tricked all of us, but you have nothing to be ashamed of. You did the best you could with the man you thought you knew." She broke then, sobbing into her hands. I held her like I hadn't since she was a child, rocking her gently as though she was still that little girl who scraped her knee and came running to me. The threats didn't stop, but neither did we. Patrol cars circled more often, and Emma stayed in close contact with investigators. Slowly, the shadows began to retreat, though the unease never fully disappeared. And in that fragile calm, something unexpected happened. Healing. Claire began to smile again, faint at first, then brighter as weeks passed. Ethan filled the house with laughter, his innocence a balm to both our wounds. I found myself looking forward to his silly questions and the way he tugged my sleeve to play. One night, as I tucked him into bed, he looked up at me with wide eyes. "Grandpa, are you my hero?" The words caught me off guard. For years I had felt invisible in my own family, reduced to little more than a wallet or an afterthought. But here, in this child's eyes, I saw something different. I smiled, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "I don't know about a hero," I said softly, "but I'll always be here to keep you safe." Still, Daniel lingered like a ghost. He wrote letters from prison. Desperate, manipulative scrawls sent to Claire. She never responded, but sometimes I'd catch her staring at the unopened envelopes before tossing them into the fireplace. The last letter was different. Inside was no plea, no apology, just a single line. "The Whitakers won't stop, and neither will I." The paper curled and blackened in the flames, but the words seared into my mind. I realized then that while Daniel was behind bars, his shadow would stretch far beyond prison walls, and our fight wasn't truly over. It happened on a stormy night, the kind of night when the wind rattled the windows and rain lashed against the roof in furious bursts. I had just settled Ethan into bed, his little body cocooned beneath blankets, when headlights cut across the driveway. 2 black SUVs, no plates. My heart dropped. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the door, a feeble weapon, but better than nothing. Claire appeared at the top of the stairs, her face pale. "Dad," she whispered, clutching the banister. "Is it them?" Before I could answer, a hard knock shook the door, then another, then a voice, low and menacing. Richard hailed, "Open up, we need to talk." The Whitakers. I didn't open. Instead, I called out through the door, "This is my home. You're trespassing. Leave now before I call the police." A chuckle echoed back. "We're not here for games, old man. Daniel's debt falls on you. You cost us money, you owe us." Another fist hammered the wood. Claire gasped, retreating to Ethan's room. I could hear her locking the door. Something inside me snapped. Years of silence, years of being dismissed, ignored, taken for granted. Daniel had tried to ruin me. Now his shadow stood on my porch, threatening the family I had fought to protect. I wasn't about to let them take another thing from me. The first crack of splintering would echoed as they tried forcing the door. I dialed 911, voice steady despite my racing pulse. "This is Richard Hale. My home is being broken into. Send officers now." I dropped the phone into my pocket and gripped the bat tighter. The door burst open, 2 men barging in, rain dripping off their leather jackets. They were bigger than me, stronger, but they weren't expecting resistance. The first lunged and I swung with everything I had. The bat connected with a sickening crack against his forearm. He howled, stumbling back. The second shoved me against the wall, his breath hot and sour against my face. "You should have stayed quiet, old man." I struggled, but just as he raised a fist, a sharp voice rang out. "Freeze, police." Blue lights flared outside. Emma stormed through the broken doorway with 2 officers behind her, weapons drawn. The Whitakers froze. The one holding me dropped his grip, hands shooting into the air. Within seconds, both men were on the ground, cuffed and cursing as officers dragged them out into the rain. Emma turned to me, eyes scanning the chaos. "You all right, Richard?" I nodded, though my chest heaved. "Better than they are." Claire appeared, Ethan clutched in her arms. Relief flooded her face at the sight of the police. She ran to me, tears streaking her cheeks. I thought they had. I pulled her close. "They didn't. They never will." In the days that followed, the Whitakers were charged with attempted home invasion, intimidation, and a laundry list of other crimes. Investigators tied them to Daniel's fraudulent dealings, their empire unraveling thread by thread. Daniel's threats from prison suddenly looked hollow. His allies were crumbling, his reach was fading. But the night stayed with me. The sound of the door splintering, the flash of headlights in the rain, the weight of fear that nearly crushed us. It was a scar, invisible, but permanent. One evening, weeks later, Claire found me sitting on the porch, staring at the horizon. "Dad," she said softly, settling into the chair beside me, "do you ever regret it, exposing Daniel, getting involved?" I thought about it, about the threats, the fear, the danger, about the way our lives had been shaken like a snow globe, scattered and unsettled. And then I thought about Ethan's laughter filling the house, about Claire slowly finding her strength again, about the way the town now saw me not as a silent bystander, but as a man who stood his ground. "No," I said finally, because the truth was always going to come out, and if I hadn't stood up, it would have buried us. Claire leaned her head on my shoulder, just like she used to when she was little. "I'm proud of you, Dad." The words filled a void I hadn't realized was still open. Life began to move forward. Slowly, cautiously, but forward nonetheless. Ethan started school, his backpack almost bigger than his body. Claire found part-time work at the library, rediscovering pieces of herself she'd long buried. Emma visited often, her presence less professional now and more something else. Something that felt like the beginning of companionship after years of loneliness. And me, I found peace in the small things. Mornings spent tending the garden, evenings filled with board games at the kitchen table, the knowledge that despite everything Daniel had stolen, he hadn't taken the one thing that mattered most, our family. The last time I heard from Daniel was a letter. Unlike the others, I opened it. It was short. Just 6 words, scrawled in uneven handwriting. I'll never forgive you, Richard. Betrayal like this doesn't just break families, it destroys lives. Richard's story may be over, but there are countless others just as shocking, just as heartbreaking. If you don't want to miss them, hit subscribe right now and join me for the next story. Trust me, it's even darker than this one.